Patreon has been purging right-wing figures, but allowing the far left to raise funds, even violent ones. This is really important because there are terrorist groups like the far left, Antifa, that are able to raise funds to cause havoc. But people like me and many other conservatives are losing our jobs over our beliefs. We are forced to turn to these exact types of funding, but even that is being denied for us. I feel like they don't want us to be able to survive. What do they want us to do? If we worked at Starbucks or was a server somewhere, whatever they think is a low-level job, they would still harass us out of work. Do they want us homeless, dead? What do they want? If we can't work in a regular field and they force us out, why can't we work for ourselves and just raise some money? Far Left Watch reports that far left extremists are raising money on Patreon to inspire insurrection. Patreon is back in the news following another round of what appears to be an ideological purge from their platform. In the last few days, the accounts for Milo Yiannopoulos, Carl Benjamin, also known as Sargon of Akkad, and James Alsop were all terminated. There are several far-left users who appear to be blatantly violating Patreon's community guidelines. These users are raising thousands of dollars each month and are actively using that money to organize and advocate for violence and often illegal criminal activity. Revolutionary Left Radio, a far-left podcast that has 700 patrons, has openly said, "I know we add qualifiers like democratic and libertarian to socialism to identify tendencies, and some use authoritarian as a pejorative, but all politics is authoritarian in a world where people disagree, and nothing is more authoritarian than revolutions." Revolutionary Left Radio also said, "F it, I just identify as a militant revolutionary communist who wants to put every fascist in the world against the wall and violently expropriate the wealth and property of the owning class." I'm hoping that catches on. Ha ha. A revolution is an insurrection, an act of violence by which one class overthrows another. They also said, "I like my working class like I like my anti-fascism, armed and militant." Far Left Watch cited a number of far left patrons that are still up. Guillotine Podcast had violence listed on their page, but when it was pointed out that that is violating terms and services, they quickly removed it, but not before Far Left Watch archived it. You can see before the community guidelines violations were pointed out that he said, "Each dollar you send my way is a bullet in the chamber of a gun we're building together, one that fires a massive 44 round at the heads of politicians and capitalists alike." Need some inspiration? ITT? Plain words, a pamphlet found at the site of several anarchist bombings in an attempt to kill the rich. Jordan Peterson, who has made a huge name for himself and raises a significant amount on Patreon with 7,304 patrons, has considered finding an alternative. He said, "I have been talking continually with the majority of members of the so-called intellectual dark web, and we are determining what steps to take. Dave Rubin and I and others have been discussing the establishment of a Patreon-like enterprise that will not be susceptible to arbitrary censorship, and we are making progress, but these things cannot be rushed without the possibility of excess error." Another top earner is Sam Harris. He is neither conservative nor liberal. He simply does not believe in the deplatforming going on, and he announced his departure from Patreon. Dear Patreon supporters, as many of you know, the crowdfunding site Patreon has banned several prominent content creators from its platform. While the company insists that each was in violation of its terms of service, these recent expulsions seem more readily explained by political bias. Although I don't share the politics of the banned members, I consider it no longer tenable to expose any part of my podcast funding to the whims of Patreon's Trust and Safety Committee. I will be deleting my Patreon account tomorrow. If you want to continue sponsoring my work, I encourage you to open a subscription at samharris.org/subscribe. As always, I remain deeply grateful for your support. And this is huge. I think taking money away from Patreon instead of Patreon taking away your money will really drive a point home to the business. Having these huge earners turn away from Patreon will really make a difference, and finding an alternative will be all the difference for those without a voice. If you want to see more from me and the rest of the Rebel team, like and subscribe.